My name is Dave Cox. I'm one of the pastors at Rocky Peak. I married Christy. She's my amazing wife. I have the privilege of raising a son named Caleb. Many years ago, it was after high school, I had a dream. It was to give my life away in ministry. And that dream was birthed right here at Rocky Peak, the church I love and the church that I call home. I started attending Rocky Peak at a pivotal time. It was when Rocky Peak was meeting at CSUN campus. I had such a deep hunger for the Lord. I had such a hunger for people to experience the transforming power of Christ. After graduating from Biola University, I volunteered at Rocky Peak. I interned at Rocky Peak, but I waited. I waited until God made it abundantly clear it was time for me to pursue full-time ministry. I went through the Los Angeles Police Academy when I was 21, and I excelled at it, and I thought law enforcement would make a long-term career. I wasn't pursuing full-time ministry at the time. I started working patrol. I eventually started working vice and other assignments. It was a great time serving as a police officer and volunteering in ministry. The call to ministry came a long time ago. It was when Rocky Peak just started meeting at our current locations in the Santa Susana Mountains. It was a time when I had such a burden to pray for our church, and I would come up at 5:30 in the morning when the elders were meeting, and I would walk the campus and pray. It was during this time that I was offered a position at Rocky Peak. It was a position as the college pastor. I was young, I was hungry, I was serving God, I was volunteering, I was pursuing Him. It was a great season. But when I got that call, I remember feeling afraid. In my mind, I had this image that somehow I had to be this ministry superstar, have it all together, and I had this fear of comparison, a fear of failure, and it gave me pause. I sought wise counsel from people who knew me the best and I respected the most, and they encouraged me to take that step, but I really heard from the Lord personally. And it wasn't to go into ministry for Him and do the work of the ministry, but really it's to go with Him and to follow His lead. My early years of ministry, they were really foundational. I was really not very good at speaking. I was good at one thing. I was really good at not leaving my one-on-one times with God until I really felt I heard from Him and I had a true burden. I learned that Jesus never sends me where He isn't already working, and that He is the main attraction. And in reality, He's the difference maker. One standout time in the early years is when God impressed on me this model of ministry where people gather in small groups. And the church gave me freedom to experiment with this model. So I grabbed a group of us that began meeting in my living room. I wanted worship, so I grabbed a guitar, I learned 4 chords, I led worship, and I told everyone that when somebody can learn 5 chords, they can begin leading worship, and that really didn't take that long. We learned to minister to each other. We learned to do real relationships, and we were experiencing the presence of Christ in such a powerful way. And this actually began a transition at Rocky Peak to a church not just with small groups, but of small groups. This is also a time that I met my wife, Christy. She was there during these foundational times. We not only fell in love with each other, but we fell in love serving the Lord together.
You remember when we first started out in small groups and you were like, this is gonna need a move of prayer. And so you asked the college students to show up at 6 a.m. for prayer meetings. And I'm telling you, we all had to wake up so early to get there at 6. We thought you were crazy. But sometimes we'd get up to 50 students in there, and we'd be worshiping. And
yeah, it was a foundation.
It was
God
foundational.
met us in those times.
One thing that began to build was this real desire to take teams across the border, because God's heart beats for the nations, and we wanted to reach people who didn't know Him. I grabbed hungry people, we prepped, we prayed, we'd travel, we'd lead in worship, we'd do dramas, preach, give testimonies on the street, and I'm telling you that God began to meet people and move in such power. We saw people healed, lives radically restored, that it really marked my life. Around this time, I became a teaching pastor at our church, and I began learning to communicate to a broader audience, and it was one of my greatest joys.
Now, Jesus never turned anybody away who came to Him. He ministered. But He also took the lead from the Father. That's the thing. It keeps you in ministry. It also gives you great confidence if you have a sense where he's calling you to do something, it's like the Lord has dropped the credit card. You've got all of heaven behind you, and you now can move in authority, and he backs you up.
I eventually moved into a senior staff role at Rocky Peak and began serving as one of the staff elders. As a senior team, we would go away together on retreats with a purpose to seek God on behalf of the church. And we really developed out of these time our mission, our vision, and values for Rocky Peak. There was a re-envisioning that was happening. It included launching a new ministry to serve those who attend our weekend services. The idea is that every guest that comes really is a guest of Christ. At a round table with senior pastors, everybody looked at me and says, "Would you want to lead and launch that?" I agreed, and we created a new ministry called First Impressions. Today, this team is comprised of over 450 volunteers, and they serve sacrificially every weekend. Serving at Rocky Peak, I've had a chance to lead and serve in a lot of different areas, whether it's been kids ministry, student ministries, family ministries, prayer ministry, global ministries, weekend services, life groups, or community outreach. God was doing something within me, continuing to, I think, refine my passions and my hungers. And he was actually beginning to do something deeper. He was beginning to lead in a new way. Part of my growth was learning to be finely tuned to listen and follow. God really met me in a very powerful way. It was on my first missions trip to Zoe International's Thailand location. The Holy Spirit really began to ignite things that were deep within me and to the very vision of Zoe International, which is reaching every person and rescuing every child. And the concept of kids being enslaved, they need rescue. So my heart beat to ensure that kids could literally get rescued. And not just rescued, but restored in the most powerful and beautiful ways for Christ. Looking at my life, thinking with 25 years of ministry and law enforcement experience, my next step has become clear, and it's to partner with Zoe International, a global child rescue ministry. For me, it is amazing to see that God is taking my police experience, he's taking my passion to reach those who don't know God, and my experience seeing Jesus bring deep transformation to people's life. And he's bringing it all together, calling on me to take that globally. So I'm so thankful for my church family at Rocky Peak. We have been through so much together, and I believe that Rocky Peak is just as much a part of this new story as me and my family are. And as God promised many years ago when I stepped into ministry, he would always go with me in ministry, and he would be the one that ministers, because Jesus is the one who masterfully, gently, and powerfully sets people free.